Welcome to episode 29 of the Bulls REKAP Podcast. I'm Joe Cowley of the Chicago Sun-Times. You can follow me at the Chicago Sun-Times in the sports section, or you can follow me on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at jcowleyhoops. Follow at your own risk. I'd like to congratulate the New York Knicks. They are the latest organization to stare at the curse of Thibs and thumb their nose at it, and now be prepared for pestilence and blight and plague. And how do I know this? Because there's a history there. So obviously, the NBA offseason is more fun than the regular season at times on days like yesterday when the Knicks break a curse of 25 years and reach the Eastern Conference Finals, and they don't have a lot of roster maneuverability, so the change they make, at least on the surface, that's the change they make, is let's fire Thibs, the guy that broke this curse, gave this team an identity, took this organization from irrelevant to relevance the last 5 years. And this is not new, why does a Bulls podcast talking about Thibs? Besides the fact that he was a Bulls coach, a former Bulls coach, because this gets into a bigger picture. This gets into when your owner is a poor ownership group, whether it's a group or an individual, whether your front office is poor at its job, eventually it's going to show itself. Eventually you can't help, a Nick can't help but Nick. The Bulls at times can't help but Bull. The Bears can't help but Bear. The White Sox can't help but White Sox. There can be years that they cover it up, where that one guy that comes into the picture can cover up the mistakes of front offices, the mistakes of ownership, and they're so good at their job that they take them to a level, whether it's the playoffs or whether it's a championship, that they cover up the blemishes. But eventually, bad ownership, bad front office, it's going to show itself, and the fish rots from the head down. So let's start off with the Bulls. Okay, this is why I know how this story ends. 2014-15, Bulls lose to the Cavs in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Back-to-back 50-win seasons for Thibs. Paxson and Gar, and look, there's so much stuff going on behind the scenes. At this point, they've tried to cut Thibs' legs off. They trade Luol Deng without telling him, who was one of his favorite players. They say you have no say in the roster. He and the coaching staff wanted Draymond Green in a draft. They decided to go Calipari talked Gar into Marcus Teague. We all saw how that ended up. So more and more, the civil war is going on behind the scenes. But the bottom line is Pax is smart. Gar is smart. They know that Thibs is coaching his ass off, and he is turning this into something special. Derrick Rose is not an MVP without Thibs. You can say whatever you want. Oh, the talent, blah, blah, plea injury, blah, 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 blah. Derrick Rose is not an MVP without Thibs. Joakim Noah is not in the finalist for MVP, Defensive Player of the Year without Thibs. Period. Forget that Nate Robinson got his first multi-year contract under Thibs, and DJ Augustine has his career resurrected under Thibs. And you go right down the line of all the guys. Taj Gibson. You go right down the line of all the guys that were affected by Thibs. But so the Bulls, they don't need Thibs. And the reason for the firing, besides the Jerry Reinsdorf statement that was a kick in the ass to Thibs, knowing that Thibs couldn't say anything back, otherwise he doesn't get the money that was owed to him. But the reason for the firing, at least with Gar Pax try to pass on an ignorant fan base that believed it, was this was a championship-level team with Pau and all those guys, Jimmy, Derek, and they didn't feel like Thibs got the most out of that team. Okay. They go with Fred Hoiberg, who, after a vaunted coaching search that took 30 seconds and was already predetermined before the firing, they go with Fred Hoiberg. So now you have this hotshot college coach, which I think Fred really is a good college coach. You have this team, this roster that is championship ready, but the problem was the head coach. How'd that work out? Well, let's go back. They didn't make the playoffs that next year under Fred. In the decade since Thibs, they have won more than 45 games once. Think about that. They've won 45 games or more once. They've never gotten out of the first round of the playoffs. As a matter of fact, they have 3 playoff wins. 3 games, playoff wins. They're on their third coach. The best of the 3 so far in Billy Donovan. There's no doubt about that. But the Bulls are a punchline. They are trapped in mediocrity. They're a joke. I would argue the last 20 years, 25 years of Bulls basketball, and people argue the last dance and stuff. But look, you can at least say that there was that front office felt like we've run this thing out with Phil. We've done everything we can. MJ, Pippen, there's arguments if Pippen was going to come back, wasn't going to get whatever. It played itself out. It got 6 championships. You can say what you want. But since then, the worst 2 moves, number 2, trading Jimmy Butler, number 1, firing Thibs. Both of them has sent the Bulls from a global brand, which it still is, but into irrelevance. Okay, so Thibs' second stint, Minnesota, a second dysfunctional ownership group. Glenn Taylor, who, if you don't understand if he's a dysfunctional owner, just look at the last 3 years. Oh, I'm selling the team. I'm going to sell it to Alex Rodriguez and this ownership group. Oh, shoot. I'm not selling this team because I undervalued it, and now we have a star in Anthony Edwards, and I want it back. Obviously, it goes to court. Glenn Taylor loses. Alex Rodriguez and the ownership group will now be taking over the Minnesota Timberwolves. But before Thibs got there, you were talking about an organization where Flip Saunders, who was a super nice guy, was never disputed, was hiring buddies and had 10 guys doing the job of 2 people. It was just like a big fraternity house. Weren't really winning much. 13-year playoff drought. Flip hands it off. They go through a couple different coaches. Thibs takes it over. He took over a 29-win team. By year 2, 47 wins. 47 wins by year 2. Ends a 13-year playoff drought. During that season, first of all, they had, in a loaded Western Conference, they had the best record against the Western Conference. Secondly, Jimmy Butler gets hurt in the second half of that season, and then all of a sudden they're trying to hold on. Jimmy comes back for the playoffs. He wasn't 100%. They lose in the first round. The following season, I think Thibs is 19-21, but they've won 2 or 3 games in a row. Glenn Taylor decides that since Flip, rest in peace, can't be the coach of this team, and the feelings were so good, we're going to make his son, Ryan, the head coach. This dude couldn't coach a middle school Catholic school league team and perform well, but we're going to give him the keys to the car of a team that ended a playoff drought 13 years earlier. We're going to give it to Ryan Saunders. The stories, obviously the Minnesota Timberwolves media is hamstrung because Glenn Taylor also owns the newspaper up here. But the stories that you were hearing out of here that were never reported is what a clown show it was under Ryan Saunders. It was not at that time an NBA head coach. But poor ownership, poor front office decide Ryan Saunders is going to be the guy. He's going to return us to a time when everyone was happy, because the building was not happy. When Tom came in and was given full reign, the only place he was given full reign over roster, over over personnel, he went through the departments and he's like, why do we have 5 guys when with the Bulls, I had 2 guys doing this job? Who are these 5 guys? Oh, they're friends of Flip? Oh, you're fired. He was clearing out departments left and right. He was doging the Minnesota Timberwolves and turning them into a professional organization. How do I know that? Because a 13-year playoff drought was ended. That's why. So Timberwolves, they don't just drop off. The Bulls was subtle. At least the Bulls were interesting for a couple of years. They made the playoff run. They lost to Boston in the first round, and then they traded Jimmy. So at least they had a pulse. This team had no pulse. They stumble into the 2020 number one lottery pick. They get Anthony Edwards, obviously generational player, has the potential to be the new face of the NBA. They have now been turned around. But immediately after Thibs, welcome to pestilence and blight and drought and plague. Okay. The New York Knicks situation. James Dolan was operating the biggest. The fun and dysfunction was going on in New York, in Madison Square Garden. Let's see. First year for Thibs with New York, 41-31, makes the playoffs. Back-to-back 50-win seasons, first time since 94-95, where a guy named Pat Riley was the coach. But wait, there's so many problems with Thibs, especially this season, because we're hearing the reasons yesterday for the firing. The offense wasn't good enough. Oh, really? Offensive efficiency rating this season, 5th. 9th in scoring. Top 10 in scoring. Top 5 in offensive efficiency rating. But he doesn't develop a bench. I'm trying to think back. There's this thing called the bench mob in Chicago. Pretty damn good. Elite bench. But he doesn't develop young players. I believe Taj Gibson was on the bench mob. He was a young guy. I believe Derrick Rose was the youngest MVP ever to win the award. But he doesn't develop young guys. Okay. So all that stuff is just, it's nonsense. It's excuses. So they decide, okay, he wears players out. Okay. That's funny because Jalen Brunson is the clutch player wins clutch player of the year this season. And to win that award, you have to be dominant in the final minutes of fourth quarters of games. But he's too worn out. How can he be dominant? Okay. So all the little things that people like to say and the narratives they like to run about Thibs. Thibs is the biggest knock you could say on Thibs. He takes rosters that aren't championship level or rosters that aren't playoff level and turns them into that. Who's been his greatest player? Derrick Rose? You can argue Derrick Rose has been his best player. But, when I compare Thibs and I look at Thibs and the guy that comes to mind, Mike Malone, who was fired by Denver because he doesn't play nice with his front office, there's really not a lot of difference in them. If you look at the numbers this year, both of them had the shortest amount of minutes for a bench because they didn't have the bench personnel. That's not their fault. They're not going to play guys that are going to lose them games just because to expand the bench. I think New York had played the fewest amount of minutes. I think Denver was third, and that was the big knock on Malone. The difference is Malone had this guy named Jokic, who you can argue is a top 5 center of all time, maybe even top 3. Who's Thibs' elite top 10 player that he's ever had? Don't say Derrick Rose is a top 10 point guard in the NBA history. Didn't prove to be true. Was he great for 3 years, 2.5 years? Obviously, but availability is a great ability to have. So all these excuses of what happened there, this leads me to, I don't know if it's a conspiracy theory or just, so here's what you have to know about the New York thing, okay? Leon Rose, basically CAA was the agency that James Dolan decided to hand the organization over to. Leon Rose used to be an agent, Thibs' agent, gets hired. One of his first moves is bring in William Wesley. Those of you that don't know William Wesley or the name William Wesley, Worldwide West, you may know him as. He is I don't even know how to explain him. Street agent on steroids. I mean, this guy has his hands on a lot of things, a lot of players, a lot of coaches. Trace this back before William Wesley, or before Thibs is brought in. The one thing, William Wesley's hired as an advisor of Leon Rose. And there were a lot of people that were like, what? Okay. It sounded, on paper, it sounded very unique. We're bringing in a guy who's an agent and knows these players. And another guy is going to be his advisor, who kind of really has an inside guy. It's almost like a lesser version of why Mark Eversley was hired. Mark Eversley has a Nike background. These Nike dudes, they know these players. They know the cousins. They know the camp. They know who to hand out the shoes to. They know aunts, uncles, moms, dads, grandmas. They know everybody. Worldwide West is like that 10 times over. So it was a shrewd move because it's outside the box. So Leon brings him in. The name to remember, before Thibs is brought in, Wes wants Johnny Bryant on the coaching staff. Young dude, supposed to be good with players. He's brought in right before Thibs is hired. So Thibs kind of inherited him. What I do know is Thibs and Johnny Bryant did not see eye to eye on a lot of stuff. What I also know is Thibs believes that your coaching staff is on the boat with you, rowing and feeling it every day. And if you're a spy or perceived spy, you might not even be a spy. You might be someone that he just feels is linked to someone in ownership or the front office that is telling secrets out of the coaching room. If he feels like you are that guy, because he went through that in Chicago, Randy Brown, true or untrue, Randy has denied it. I've talked to Randy about it. I wrote a story about it. Randy called me. We had a discussion. And there were just players that believed that Randy Brown was a spy. And there were people on the coaching staff that thought Johnny Bryant was a spy for Wes. So Johnny Bryant and Thibs are not seeing eye to eye. There is a report out there that Worldwide Wes was begging Leon Rose a couple of years ago to fire Thibs then and make Johnny Bryant the coach. The team's humming along. Players are developing. Things are going too well. How are you going to do that? How are you going to sell that to the New York market that has been craving for the Knicks to be good? They have an identity. They have a culture. They have a buzz. How are you going to do that? You can't. Johnny Bryant knows there's no place for him to go. He leaves to go with Kenny Atkinson. Don't even get me started on Kenny Atkinson. We'll get to him in a second. Meanwhile, the dysfunctional owner, James Dolan, is off building the Las Vegas Sphere. Anyone that doesn't understand, James Dolan can't help but meddle. But now he's occupied while this Thibs rising and this Knicks resurgence is going on. James Dolan, who's in charge, he's the CEO of the group that built the Las Vegas Sphere. He's out in Vegas. So he's not sitting courtside. No one even sees James Dolan for a couple of years. It's actually probably the best thing that happened in Knicks basketball is that James Dolan had a shiny new toy to worry about, the Sphere. That means no meddling. That means Leon Rose was actually running this thing. And Leon Rose, the one thing I will say, and I do know for a fact in talking to Thibs and talking to people familiar with the situation, the one caveat that Leon Rose told Thibs is, because of what happened in Minnesota, you have no say in personnel. I'll ask your opinion. I'll run things by you. But at the end of the day, personnel is my decision. You just coach them up. That's fine. So people that thought that Thibs was just beating down the door to be reunited with Karl Anthony Towns, he had no say in that. He'll coach him up as best he can, but he had no say in that. So let's clear the air there. That I know for a fact. So Johnny Bryant leaves. Kenny Atkinson takes him to Cleveland. Now all of a sudden, and I'm not saying Johnny Bryant's going to get the Knicks job. If he does, then this is not a conspiracy theory. This is fact that this has been kind of the plot for a couple of years. They're waiting for some kind of slip, some kind of opening, something that they can sell. As weak as it is that Indiana was a lower seeded team, even though Indiana might actually have one of the best players on the roster in Halliburton, and Indiana has Siakam, who has an NBA championship, has all-star games underneath his belt on the roster, and Indiana could go 1 through 10, and Indiana has an elite coach like the Knicks do in Carlisle. Even though you can go ahead and Indiana, by the way, since the All-Star break, has been one of the best teams, offensive rating, defensive rating, along with OKC in the league. But you want to go ahead and sell it, they're a lower seed, that's fine. Try telling that to Cleveland, who they beat and disposed of, or Milwaukee, who they beat and disposed of. here we are now with who replaces him. Okay, so this brings me back to the name Johnny Bryant. I don't think he's going to get the job because that would be such a obvious thing. I think that they are going to try going elsewhere. But that's the story behind the scenes to keep an eye on. I'll get to Kenny Atkinson in a second. So there's lessons to be learned out of this. And you would think Chicago fans have learned this lesson enough. White Sox fans, you saw a guy in Ozzie Guillen who didn't play nice with all the media members, who didn't play nice with the analytics department, who didn't play nice with the front office at times, who doesn't believe that numbers dictate things, who believes in feel and understanding guys and that statistics lie. Very much like Thibs, very much like Mike Malone. These guys believe in feel. They believe in hard coaching. They believe in what they believe. They don't want some nerdy analytics guy who feels like he has his foot in the door. And that pisses off a lot of people. That pisses off fan bases. That pisses off bloggers who use nerd stats and numbers to try getting their foot in the door and a seat at the table that they will never be allowed to eat at. But they feel like, oh, a guy like Thibs. I mean, you look, there's a lot of bloggers that are very statistical oriented, and they personally have problems with Thibs. On the baseball side, they personally have had problems with Ozzie Guillen. Meanwhile, these guys have taken dysfunctional organizations to as high as you can take them. Ozzie Guillen, World Series, back-to-back 90-win seasons. I don't think that's been done by the White Sox since, maybe the 60s, whatever. And then what happened since then? We've seen it. So New York's about to get a feeling of what it's like to think that you're smarter than the coach that's way smarter than anybody in your organization. And I will say they do have a roster that feels very similar to what the Bulls did when they let Thibs go. A lot of good pieces, a lot of good players. I don't think they'll fall as far off as the Bulls did with Fred Hoiberg that first year. And there's many reasons why that happened. But Eastern Conference Finals, I'll be shocked. And there's an opening for him too. I mean, Boston could, who knows what happens with Boston. Jason Tatum out for probably all of next season. New Boston ownership wants to go ahead and start lightening the load of salary. Cleveland, who knows what happens there. I think they'll probably run everyone back. Indiana, they're going to have some decisions to make, but I do think they'll mostly be everyone back. So, look, everyone knows I'm a Thibs guy. Love the guy. I think he is a coach's coach. I think he is old school. I think he had New York and Madison Square Garden buzzing for the first time since I've been covering the NBA, which is it'd be year 14 we're going on. When I took over, New York was a punchline, a laughing stock, kind of like what the Bulls have become, a punchline, a laughing stock. Every so often, something good would happen there, and ownership can't help but ruin it, or the front office, whatever. The incompetence. People think that these professional teams, these pro-level teams, are hiring the best people to run them. They're not. Trust me. There's a lot of pettiness. There's a lot of friends of friends. There's a lot of, I think he's the right guy. There's a lot of, well, if Phil was a great coach, he has to be great at building rosters. Well, if Michael Jordan was one of the greatest players of all time, he must know how to run an organization. Well, if LeBron, who did a good job of picking up personnel early in his career that he wants to play with, he must be kind of a pseudo GM. Let's let him have full say. So a lot of these organizations think that they know the answers. They don't. They don't. When you look around the landscape of professional sports and you think about the mainstay organizations that always seem to be good and aren't, they're not winning the championship every year, but they always seem to be good. Green Bay Packers, Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, everyone knows the ownership of the Steelers because of the Rooney Rule, but you never hear about the Rooneys getting involved with personnel decisions. Everyone knows the Packers don't have ownership; they're owned by people. By basically a stock group. So you never hear about them getting involved. Then you go to the Cowboys. Jerry Jones had great success early on. And then ego gets in the way. And then your clownery becomes you. Now they're a laughing stock year in, year out. They're just a drama. They'd rather be in the headlines than the Super Bowl. Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, we know the Hunt family owns them, but you don't hear about them getting in the way of Andy Reid doing things. They know they have an elite guy. They know they have an elite front office. In the NBA, say what you want about Miami, Golden State. I mean, if you know the NBA, you know who the ownership groups are, but you never hear about those ownership groups getting in the way of Pat Riley or getting in the way of Steve Kerr and now Mike Dunleavy. You just don't hear about it because that's what proper ownership groups do or proper front offices do. They're professional. They understand that coaches coach, players play, and we GM or we exec or we suit, however they want to deem it. So look, New York Knicks, be prepared to become the new Chicago Bulls. The plight is coming. The blight is coming. The plague is coming. Pestilence is coming. You have made this decision. You have poked the curse of Thibs. You're still going to be paying him $30 million. Thibs will be fine. Trust me. This one probably hurt more than the Chicago one because that's the organization he grew up in Connecticut close to. He was a Knicks guy. And I feel, and the feeling is unless you went to the Garden the last 3, 4, 5 years and felt it, it's hard to explain. But there was something after Knicks games that I haven't felt since I was doing the Bulls as a columnist early on after the D Rose games and that run before losing to LeBron. And it's a great feeling for a basketball city because New York is a great basketball city. Chicago is a great basketball city. And when you have that feeling around your arena and your fan base, and there's a culture of toughness and intensity and blue collar and old school when everything was right and players being coached hard, there's nothing like it. I don't care what anyone says. The finesse, pretty boy stuff, that's for the Lakers. Let them have showtime. Chicago, New York was about grit and about toughness. Thibs embraced that. And so I think the Knicks are headed for some dark days, and I'm just going to sit back with a smile on my face and watch it unfold. So that's my rant as well as my take. There's a lot in there. There's a lot of layers that I think are still going to be reported. There's some stuff I still can't say because we'll see how it plays out. But trust me, dark days are coming for the New York Knicks, and the Bulls know what that's like. All right, so no reason to do a rant, but we're going to go into a list. Some people are going to say Thibs might be done. I don't think he is. Top 5 destination places for Thibs. Okay, here we go. Number 5. I don't think I can, since I've been covering the Bulls, I don't think I can come up with an organization who lacks an identity and lacks a purpose in life more than the Charlotte Hornets. He's not going to get them to a championship, most likely, but he would give them an identity and a toughness that they sorely need. So number 5, Charlotte. Number 4, Washington. Thibs in the nation's capital. Again, a team that's lost its identity. It used to have an identity. Used to actually be a playoff team when I first started covering the Bulls back in the day. Lost their way. A lot of draft capital coming up, a mentality to tank and try and get better. For obviously this season didn't work out because they're not getting Cooper Flag, but for next season as well, I think Thibs would add a culture there. Number 3, Memphis. I think is a team that's kind of ready-made for Thibs. You know, they got the grit. They believe in that, defensive-minded mentality first. They've lost their way. They've kind of lost a discipline there, whether that's the players running the asylum. But I think Thibs would come in, and I think he would do for Ja what he did for Derek and what he did for Jalen Brunson, and that's turn him into an MVP candidate and an elite guard in the league. Number 2, Phoenix. Again, a team that's kind of just begging for a massive change, a massive identity, but mostly just a major breath of toughness. When you think of the Phoenix Suns the last couple of years, you think of swinging for the fences and soft. And I think Thibs would bring an instant hardness to Phoenix. Number one, and I know what you're going to say. Joe, you've lost your mind. The Cleveland Cavaliers. The defense is there. It's ready built, ready made. Kenny Atkinson, coach of the year. How can they want to coach? Let me tell you something about Kenny Atkinson. And there's more than a handful of NBA coaches. They would never admit it because it is a brotherhood. Kenny Atkinson he's Jim Boylan, but better at X's and O's. And what do I mean by that? He is an operator. He is somewhat of a fraud who happened to fall into the right place at the right time in Cleveland. He's definitely better than Boylan with X's and O's. I will say that. But Kenny Atkinson's act is going to run out real quick because he's a yes man, yes man, yes man, and he makes promises and yeses to a bunch of people, players, personnel, people around him. When you yes everybody, at some point you got to say no. And so Kenny Atkinson, the act's going to run real thin. If Cleveland was smart with what's there right now and the window that's open, the Cavaliers would move off of Kenny Atkinson, pay him what he wants or what he's owed, and hire Tom Thibodeau to take over that, because that turns them from number one seed, early round exit to whatever excuses you want to make for that exit, to an NBA champion in one season. Tailor-made, ready to go. The culture is there. It just needs to be amped up by a guy who's not a fraud, not an operator, a real coach. So I think that would be the best destination for him. Won't happen probably. But if the Cleveland Cavaliers are serious about taking this thing over next season and possibly the year after, Tom Thibodeau is their coach. So that's it for me. That's my Thibodeau take. People were waiting to hear it on X. X doesn't pay me, so dookie on that. And that's my take. That's my feelings. Until next week, I got next.